Hi, I'm Tom Kane, the voice of Professor Utonium and Yoda and a bunch of other things. And enjoy your bento, you will. Search the Force, and foreseen it I have. Yes.
Okay, welcome back, folks. Certainly glad you could join us today. You're listening to Pop Culture Bento, the single-portion takeout meal for your ears with conversations about movies, TV, comics, video games, and the culture surrounding them. This is episode number 40, and I'm one of your co-hosts, Jack Russell, and joining me today, per usual, are my co-hosts Bradley McGinnis.
Hello there.
Justin Russell.
Hello there.
And joining us for the first time ever, we have a special guest. I'm honored to introduce Chris Frakes.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. Just for the people who don't know out there, how would you would you mind telling them what your relationship is to us?
Friends, purely. Yeah,
it's a long story.
Well, we met back in high school, and we were in band together. So we're talking about what, 10 years plus. So, long time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a great show for you today. We got a lot to talk about. Our feature discussion is going to be a Sorry to Bother You review discussion. We got a non-spoiler and a spoiler section for you. And in the news, we're going to cover stuff like Shazam, some Overwatch news, some Marvel news, and some Netflix news. So stick with us, and we're going to step you through all of the week's entertainment news. So without further ado, let's start off the show with the entertainment news and notes. So the entertainment news and notes is a segment where we step you through the newest and most notable happenings from the past week. So first up in movie news, the first image of Jack Dylan Grazer and Zachary Levi as Freddie Freeman and Shazam in the movie Shazam has been released. So go check it out. Find the image for yourself. What did you guys think about this promotional image here?
I love it because I think it captures the essence of Shazam. And forgive me if I go between Captain Marvel and Shazam. I hate that that's not his title anymore, but I'll eventually get over that. So, the idea behind Shazam is that he is Billy Batson, but in a buffed up flying brick superhero's body. And even with some of the elements, like he has the wisdom of Solomon that gives him an enhanced intellect and greater insight into what's going on. So he's able to handle a lot of things as an adult, but he's still a kid on the inside. And I think that'll be one of the biggest elements that's going to separate it from all the superhero movies that we've had going on up until this point.
Well, since it's a photo and not just a generic "it's happening" thing,
right?
I mean, what I kind of want to know, because I'm less knowledgeable about that. But strictly visually, it looks very, not in a bad way, but kind of TV-y. There's sort of
I know what you're talking about.
difference between TV superheroes and how they're displayed, and also in contrast to the movies. It looks very bright colors, primary colors, very broad and less, his costume contrasts very strongly against the freaking 7-Eleven grocery store behind him, So do you think that's also sort of part of what they're going for, the tone that is?
I think so, because DC has been known up until this point being super dark and broody, not just with Batman, but even Batman versus Superman the movie and Justice League. Justice League, they were trying to amp up the tone a little bit, but it didn't. It fell flat. It was still more on the darker end of the spectrum.
How do we feel about Zachary Levi appearing in both the DC and the Marvel universes?
He's kind of like Chris Evans, right? He's playing multiple characters, and he's Captain America and the Human Torch or whatever. But
or we could even go with Ryan Reynolds on this one, transitioning from Green Lantern to Deadpool.
Exactly.
Better, yeah.
but Ryan Reynolds wants the Hal Jordan persona that he created in the movie to die, whereas Deadpool can thrive.
There might be some nerd rage out there, but I personally, don't mind. But just to speak to Zachary Levi a little bit, I watched him a lot in a sitcom, I think, called Chuck for a while,
Oh, yeah,
a couple
Chuck.
of years. Yes, he's
Yep.
actually a great like physical like comedic actor. He's kind of like this tall, lanky dude, and he can play that comedic element up really well. So I think that bodes well for what I infer the tone is from this this image. This campy like kitschy image here. So
Yeah, and Chuck was sort of early on in the sort of geek, like, I don't know, taking over the world kind of thing. That was still back in like, oh 07, oh 08. I'm just spitballing. But that was before geek was everything, right? And even though Chuck itself had that, embraced the geekiness of it, the show itself wasn't that great, but I think Levi was a good part of it, right? He kind of went with that flow, and I do agree that he could play it up a little bit.
very cool. Well, it's still in production. There's no release window attached to it yet, but it's I'm gonna stay hopeful for it. I think it
Same.
looks pretty interesting. So let's move on to video game news. In Uncharted, Drake doesn't take bullet damage. The red UI that shows hits is to represent his luck running out. So, if you guys haven't heard it or played the Uncharted games, it's kind of like, I think Call of Duty does this, where you don't really have an HP bar per se with like numbers, but as you kind of get hit, the screen kind of becomes tunnel visiony around you, and it's like either red or black or something. And once you hit a certain threshold, you die.
Well, we should start out by saying that this source was from one Jonathan Cooper at Game Anim, and he's a animator at Naughty Dog, of course, the developers of the
Yes.
Uncharted series and The Last of Us. So yeah, that's kind of one of those. It's interesting because in the tweet he says, "Oh, side note, that's something I learned when I joined the team." So I feel like that's an internal thing that they discussed to try to resolve that. I don't know. What do you guys think of it?
For me, it's been a while since I've played an Uncharted game, but I'm pretty sure I feel the character getting hit with bullets if I'm standing out in the middle of the open. So I'm not. I get what they're going for. It's like, this is like the action hero, the action hero that won't ever actually get hit up until the final bullet, or if you're just slacking off doing nothing. But I don't know. I think it's kind of a excuse that popped up for no reason. It wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was just kind of like the thing of like J.K. Rowling coming out and be like, "Oh yeah, Dumbledore is totally bisexual."
Oh yeah,
or whatever. It's just like a back end thing, and the way the what was it, animator or whatever conveyed it, then it sounds like it was actually a thing. It just wasn't conveyed well in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something that I guess it wasn't just very clear to me when I was playing the game
Yeah,
itself.
I
so it
certainly
caught me by
felt like I
surprise.
was getting shot.
I mean, one could argue that if you do take bullet damage, your luck is running out anyway.
Yeah, if you're getting shot like crazy, your luck was already pretty low to begin with. Well, okay, so what I think is interesting about this is that, I don't know, I've always seen Naughty Dog, not only their individual games, their quality and their products are, fun and famous and popular, right? But as an arc, they're one of the most interesting devs out there, especially, we grew up with Crash Bandicoot, Crash Team Racing, etc., right? I don't know if they did the racing one, but famous for Crash. Then they went to Jak and Daxter, and that's where we saw the open worldness come in, some of the gameplay mechanics getting a little more, I'll say, modern, some of the open worldiness of the Jak and Daxter franchise, especially in like the late game, like 3.
Dude, Jak 2 nailed it when they amped up the edge factor and the open world aspect of the game.
Uh-huh.
They so that's why the bullet thing I find hilarious is that they're not afraid to go kind of like darker, and they're just feels like they're waving off something that's like, hey, we're already used to the idea of a main character or pro tag getting riddled with bullets. You don't have to hand wave it for us.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the thing, is that instead of hand waving, I find it interesting is that, how like artists back in the day, like they have like, or some artists had like a thesis, like, oh, this guy, he like, this painting explores like perspective and stuff like that, and trying to resolve certain things like with light, like with impressionists or stuff like that. I kind of feel that Naughty Dog is that way with the role of violence in games, because at first it's very campy. It's jump on the turtle. It's like, oh, fun, Jak and Daxter. He's like a weird weasel dude. We're going on adventures, and then we sort of are evolving into the, oh, Indiana Jones, campy, fun, murder 1,000 people, don't think twice about it. But then after a lot of the criticism that was leveled against Uncharted after, the whole looted narrative dissonance discussion of like the gameplay not really supporting the story. They're sort of at odds, right? It's like we're supposed to be having fun with this main character. It's campy, but he's literally a mass murderer. How are we supposed how is that supposed to lie in our conscience, right? So what I find interesting is that much like those artists back in the day of that thesis, I feel like the thesis of The Last of Us was to recenter the role of violence in gaming and to really put it in context, really have it inform the story and the gameplay at the same time. And that's why it feels so brutal when you're Joel. You're trying to protect this kid. The encounters with the cordyceps or the infected are already heightened, but really the most brutal fights are against the humans, right? And I feel like this is just another sort of like example of how that disparity exists in the Uncharted series of like, oh yeah, Drake, he doesn't get shot, it's just his luck running out, I feel like that is their like adolescence or like late teens of like, oh, we're just kind of exploring our craft and trying to get better at it. But then the more mature adult version of that, where they really considered the game design and the story at the same time, was The Last of Us. So it's sort of a vestige, this concept of the luck running out is a vestige of an old paradigm in gaming that doesn't really we've sort of evolved past that,
Okay, actually, yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, Naughty Dog's known for their violent games, but I guess they don't want to be considered at the end of the day for just pumping out violence for shits and gigs for no valuable reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next story. The Overwatch. So we talked about this in a previous episode a couple weeks ago. But the Overwatch Pink Mercy skin campaign ended up raising more than $12.7 million to support the Breast Cancer Research Foundation.
Now fill me in a little bit. Is this so this is a skin that's fully available for the game?
Yeah, I don't know if it's still available, but you would go into the game, you would buy this skin, and it's this sort of, cool anime-y, like pink, cool angelic
magical girl costume.
Yeah, like it just looks cool, right? So at the same time, they're providing value, but at the same time, they gave $12.7 million to breast cancer research, and like we mentioned before, it's a really good charity. You can go on Charity Navigator and see that these guys, this organization that they donated to, it doesn't just go to general awareness. Everyone knows about breast cancer, but really goes to research and for concrete results. So I just think that this is interesting in the context of, especially last year, but it's still continuing to this year. Every game is microtransactions. Every game is skins, loot boxes, and a lot of it is controversial, and usually it's in a negative light. So I was wondering how this sort of landed on you now that it's sort of like, oh, this skin is doing, I don't know, really well for people who really need money.
Dude, loot boxes can be a source of good. Just because you are getting a random payout per exact unit of whatever you're pumping in for each box doesn't mean it can't be used towards something constructive. For this, was this like a special Pink Mercy box that you could buy, or was it?
Yeah, here's the thing about this one. It wasn't a loot box. It was straight up like one for one. You bought it for a flat price and you just got it.
I was curious about that because as much as it would have been awesome, even if it was still in the loot box system, that one's just like, hey, try to get this Pink Mercy skin, and if you get it, we'll donate part of the proceeds for breast cancer research.
That'd be terrible. Just really gambling scummy. For charity.
Yeah, that's gambling for charity. That's okay. I'm so glad it didn't turn out that way, because no matter what the outcome would have been, that's still a scummy way to go about it. So I think that's great every now and then, and that's probably absolutely plugged in. One, it's a good cause. Two, it puts off some of the heat that comes from using a loot box system in general, because I know that's still debated right now.
Yeah, but Overwatch has always done it well, right?
Correct. Overwatch has done it with some class.
Yeah, that's it. That's it for video game news. Let's move on to television. So we have some sad news here. Steve Ditko, Spider-Man co-creator and legendary comics artist, passes away at age 90.
But Ditko, we're talking about a guy who essentially, like the father of Spider-Man, creator of Doctor Strange as well, and not even just Marvel characters. We're talking about somebody that gave birth to some characters with some serious street cred for deeper and casual fans alike, and just knowing how looking at him passing, it's saddening because we need more people like him in the industry today. I mean, very rarely do you have people coming up with new characters out of the blue and then kind of showcasing what it means to be a comic creator.
Yeah, and also, like, we have to remember that guys like Stan Lee, while they're super important in the development of comics and all that, like, guys like Ditko were the guys who did the storytelling, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, guys like Stan Lee can fill in the blanks, they can write the dialogue, all that kind of stuff. They can have big ideas, but Ditko was pen to paper, and sort of, because comics are such a visual medium, the storytelling is more reliant on the implicit movement of the visuals, and guys like Ditko were the ones who were really doing a heavy load of storytelling in those early days.
I kind of made this comparison earlier, but I felt like Ditko was to Stan Lee as someone like John Williams was to Steven Spielberg. You know, like, he always worked on Spielberg's the best movies. You know, he was the guy who did the soundtrack and the music composition and you know, was completely integral to the success of the great films that we know Steven Spielberg to make, and that was pretty much Ditko to Stan Lee. I mean, one wouldn't have been the same without the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Lee was far from a one-man band. I mean, he needed people like Ditko to keep everything together and to come out with some of the amazing stories that we have today in comics. So, you know, his passing is a shame, but he has one hell of a legacy to leave behind.
Final piece of news we have here: Netflix is shutting down user reviews this summer.
Oh no!
John, did you drop?
Yeah, did he tap out for you guys too?
Oh,
yeah,
no.
Let's just wait for him to come back.
Oh my god! Hey, by the way, Justin, I don't know. Like, did you think it was a little serendipitous that after we ate 6 Papa John's pizzas this weekend, the fucking guy came out as like super racist?
Oh,
did you hear about this?
Oh,
I kind of saw. I didn't really see much about it, but did he say something new? Because I know he got like his partnership and
he
CEO
dropped the
status
N-bomb
and
in
all
a conference call.
Yeah.
Oh god.
In a meeting. Yeah, and it's he stepped down because of that.
And we enabled that, Chris.
We completely did. I was just thinking, like, goddamn, we ordered half a dozen pizzas from this son of a bitch this past weekend. You know, just lining his pockets so he can just throw out the N-word whenever he wants to. It's absurd.
What there was like a top comment in one of the stock subreddits, because this had been popping up. And one of the top comments was, yeah, guys, buy on the racist comments and sell on the corporate apology.
It's so true, though, because after the news broke that he said the N-word on the conference call, the stock took a dip, and then it shot back up after they announced that he left the company entirely today.
Oh,
isn't that crazy?
Did the stock take a garlic and ranch dip?
No.
It wasn't a tasty dip.
No. We're talking about the the chart of how much it's worth. So that's what we mean. But it's okay. You'll get the hang of this stock thing eventually.
Jonathan's back, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's going on with that, but
it's already. I already told them what your
We're just
deal
talking
was
off
with your
topic.
computer.
Oh, okay. Thank God. Where did I cut out at? I don't know.
You were just reading the byline.
You were just saying how much it sucks that you have dial-up internet now.
Apparently, Jesus Christ, it's never done this before. This is so weird.
I got 2 kilobytes a minute.
The Variety article says Netflix no longer wants to share your opinions about TV shows or movies with the rest of the world.
Thank God.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys used it at all, but I never certainly used it.
I mean, they stopped the review and the thumbs up rating thing like a couple years ago, didn't they? Where they switched to like, based on your viewing habits, we believe this is a such and such match for you, and it would be like 90% match or whatever.
Yeah, so, like people thought it was a review of like the consensus, but really it was just a matching like eHarmony would be.
Exactly. I had no idea Netflix was still even doing reviews at this point, you know, so.
Yeah. It's interesting because according to the author of this article, they cite one, low usage, like you guys are saying, but two, negative reviews, it would seem, aren't good for business.
No shit.
Especially as Netflix increases its spending on original programming, which is interesting because other sites like like Amazon, they produce Amazon Basics and their own stuff. And what if their stuff gets rated lower than the third party stuff? What if Amazon canceled their reviews? I use their reviews for buying decisions on a daily basis.
I mean, they basically don't have to spend any money on focus grouping because they have their customers do it for them immediately. So, I'd keep it if I were Netflix and Amazon.
If anything, I would I'd expand it to since I think it's only on the desktop version, because I don't see any form of user ratings pop up on, like, let's say the PS4 when you're using it, or any other way of viewing Netflix. So I'd say, pump it out. Let people actually contribute to the reviews, and then it'll help you in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I think the difference between what you brought up, Jonathan, with the Amazon thing is that with Amazon, they sort of act as a central hub for those discussions, right? Where they are the buy stuff place. And to talk about the stuff you're buying, you go to the Amazon reviews section, right? And I think that it might be a technological thing, maybe because on Amazon, not everything is technological, so maybe people aren't as tech savvy, or maybe that's a stretch. But with like movies or games and other geeky techie stuff, I feel like those voices, or the people who want to consume that stuff, if they want to get reviews or kind of see if this thing's good or not, or for analysis, etc., they're not going to Amazon's review section for a movie. You know what I mean? You go to your favorite review site. There's so many out there. You go to your YouTube channel. You go to any other podcast or anything that critiques movies. And I feel like it's just not a very that's not the central place that you're going to have those kind of discussions. You could just go on your phone while you're, it's like, oh, I see something on Netflix. You pull out your phone and see if that's worthwhile, right? So I feel like it's a little bit of a different equation. I understand what you're saying, but also we should always be dubious of user reviews anyways, because they tend to, without proper oversight. This happens a lot with the Steam marketplace, but they're trying to have a lot of mechanisms of oh, this person has bought this game, this person has put this many hours in this game, etc. But a lot of brigades happen of if a certain community doesn't like the way a game is portraying, or something that has nothing to do with the game.
YouTube trailers.
Yeah, they could just go in and bomb their reviews.
Yeah.
And also reviews, when they get stuck in a system like that, they tend to get aggregated into these large numbers that come out to look like a grade of here's the 4 stars and here's the 92%. And people start arguing about those numbers rather than the perspectives of the people writing them, right? So I kind of feel like no one's clicking into the Netflix reviews to read anyone's, synopsis of what they think is the theme of the movie. They just see the stars, right? So I kind of feel like removing that enforced objectivity of the mass is kind of okay, because for me, when I go to a review, I want intense subjectivity. I'm looking for a specific person that I know. I want to know what they thought of a movie, how it landed on them based on their life experience, etc. I want to have that discussion rather than, this thing had 92. That's 2% less than the other one. That must mean it's terrible, So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't think it's a huge deal because I don't think a lot of people use it anyways.
Unfortunately, unlike Justin, I do want to know if the series I'm about to binge watch for 40 hours is a piece of shit, or if it's not. The rating system, no, it's not perfect, right? And it doesn't. You might like something that's rated 2 stars on Netflix, and you might hate something that's rated 5 stars. That's the deal with art, which is really what this is. But at the end of the day, I kind of want to. It's like looking up a restaurant on Google or on Yelp, man. If people are finding cockroaches in their fucking soup, I want to know about it. Maybe the soup tastes good, but I want to know about problems people are having, and I want to know how people generally feel about the TV and the movies that I spend. We spend a lot of money on Netflix. It's $10 a month.
Well, not only money, but like you said, time.
Time,
with
exactly.
The binging,
Exactly. Yeah. With movies are 2 hours long, and each episode is 45 minutes long, and each season is 12 seasons or 12 episodes long. So you're absolutely right. So I want to know what I'm getting into is going to be worth the time I'm spending on it.
Right.
So,
and I do want to call myself out a little bit in the fact that, like I said, it's so easy to have access to, your favorite reviewer or your YouTube to kind of see if that's worthwhile. But not everyone is like that. Maybe that's just my own, like, I'm 24 years old bubble. Of like, I pull out my phone, I see if that's worthwhile, etc. But, maybe there are people out there who are, maybe older who aren't going to take the time to go like, is this bad? Like, they just see it. They kind of come from that blockbuster mentality of like, they see the cover looks cool, and I watch the thing. There's something romantic about that. So maybe I should sort of look outside my own perspective, and, that might be valuable to certain segments of the customer base.
I'd say if they want to get rid of the reviews for non-original content, that's awesome, but keep all the reviews for the Netflix original stuff.
Right, because that does get into interesting territory of they are creating things, and if they are the sort of owners of that data or the way that the algorithm shows that data.
Would I trust all the reviews about Netflix stuff on Netflix's own site? Right. So yeah.
I also kind of view it like when I scroll through Twitter, like a lot of times it's like, you don't need to trust or listen to take to heart every comment you come by, because it's like, okay, this dude's like a nobody Twitter egg that like, has 2 followers and posts like hate speech about other stuff. So it's kind of like, who are these people that are the review culture is so weird anyways, with the people mostly being 1 and 5 stars, and you kind of lose the middle there. So, the whole thing's kind of a little dubious to me. So
got it. Don't trust anything or anyone.
Why don't we just throw out the concept of statistics altogether? Because you guys seem to not like the idea of averaging reviews that people got.
What do numbers even mean?
Right. Well, I agree with you on that, but I think they serve a purpose. But like, they're not. Don't fucking put all your money on it.
Yeah, they're not gospel.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there is a certain amount of responsibility on the consumer to know what data they're looking at and the sources of that data and whether it's trustworthy or not. So yeah, I think it does go both ways.
Binge responsibly, people.
Binge responsibly. I like that. All right. Well, that's it for the entertainment news and notes. Let's move on to the media forecast. All right, so in this segment, we parse through what's on the upcoming release radar. So let's get out our calendars and mark up those release dates. So this episode comes out on the 13th, Friday. On Nintendo Switch owners can look forward to Octopath Traveler, Square Enix's latest RPG, and Captain Toad, a port of the the Wii U port of the game that's been kind of embellished a little bit and is coming to Switch now. And also, if you're a theater goer, you might be checking out Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in Skyscraper.
Dude, that movie, I have to comment, just that movie, and I didn't notice it like the first time I saw the trailer, but the subsequent viewings of the trailer, they must have been in the board meeting for this. It's like, okay, guys, we gotta make an action movie with The Rock, but how do we make him more believable? Oh, we'll put him a skyscraper, and we'll take off one of his legs. Let's, yeah. People will like that a lot.
I can't wait for the sequel, Strip Mall. I mean, that'll be really fun.
The trailer for this got me because it was like those straw that broke the camel's back thing for the take a old song, put the high register piano slow motion version of it, because it was a Tom Petty "I Won't Back Down" but like a slowed down version of a register piano thing. Like, does that even have a name nowadays? Like, what is that?
A piano cover, maybe. You see it a lot in commercials, right? Like, would they kind of use it for dramatic effect?
That's so annoying though.
It sucks.
Also, yeah, did you see the poster for Skyscraper that
No.
in quotes paid homage to the Die Hard cover, because the Die Hard cover is awesome, right? It's the one with Bruce Willis, half his face is sort of in the shadow of Nakatomi Tower, and it's like, it's like standing tall, and it's like, oh, one man, he has to do blah, blah, blah. It was so cool, whatever.
What, one man, one leg, no chance.
Yeah, exactly. But they did a sort of carbon copy of that with whatever this skyscraper is instead of the Nakatomi Plaza, and The Rock instead of Bruce Willis. And it was like, remember those Ready Player One posters that knocked off it was a series of posters that knocked off famous movie posters, except put their like CGI main characters in it.
Yep.
It was that level of bad and annoying.
Ooh.
And oh God, please stop.
Ooh.
Next Tuesday, July 17th, Isle of Dogs, Rampage, and Super Troopers 2 are coming to your home in the form of DVD and Blu-ray. And finally, next Friday, the 20th, we have The Equalizer 2 coming to theaters. That's the one with it's like the Denzel Washington. I think it's an action movie or something.
Yeah.
I never saw the first one.
Part Uber driver, part badass.
Is that what it is?
He actually does drive an Uber for part of the movie. Yes.
Okay, so it's like the Transporter, but different.
If it's anything like the Uber rides I take, it's going to be the most boring movie ever.
Do you ever talk to your Uber drivers, Chris, or like, do you want them to be quiet? Like,
well, so I live in Miami, for those of you who don't know, and there's a large population of people who speak English as a second language down here, and you might be able to guess the first language they speak. So there's obviously a language barrier, which is perfect, right? I mean, even if we both spoke English, man, I don't want to know shit about my Uber driver. So I will give you guys the funniest anecdote that I have about riding in an Uber, and this happened the first time I flew down here to interview for my current job, and I got in the Uber to go to my hotel, and the guy was straight out of, he was fresh off the boat from Cuba, and had been driving this Uber for like 2 months, and he was like, he turned to me, he goes, do you like Donald Trump? And I swear to God, I thought he said, do you like donuts? And
oh God.
I was like, yeah, dude, who doesn't love donuts, man? Give all day, every day. It turns out he asked me if I like Donald Trump. So I had to. That was an interesting conversation on the way to the hotel, and was disappointed because I thought he had donuts for me, and he didn't. I try to avoid Uber, especially after that. I try to avoid Uber talking as much as I can. Just get me to where.
Yeah, I really wish they had on the reviews afterwards like a button that says like instead of friendly driver or expedited route or whatever, there's just a button that just says like didn't fucking say a word to me. I would mash that every time.
Every time, 5 stars. No tip.
All right, and that's it for your media forecast. So let's move on to the featured discussion. We're going to talk about Sorry to Bother You, and this is going to be the non-spoiler section, so we'll give our impressions and recommendation, and then we'll move on to the spoilers for you guys who have seen it to kind of dissect it a little more in depth. And then Brad will leave us because he hasn't seen it, but it'll be me, Justin, and Chris, so you can look forward to that. All right, here we are. Sorry to Bother You. According to IMDb, it is in an alternate present-day version of Oakland, telemarketer Cassius Green discovers a magical key to professional success, propelling him to a macabre universe. It's sitting at a 79 on Metacritic, and let's start with Chris. What were your overall impressions for Sorry to Bother You?
Well, I thought it was a great movie. I think I thought it was kind of like genre bending in a way. Obviously it has this kind of overt political message. That's kind of hard to ignore, but it kind of blended everything from science fiction, a little bit of surrealism, which I find a lot of really, like, some of the best movies are that kind of genre bending, and they kind of just completely ignore any kind of preconceived notion you might have of what the movie's going to be. And that's exactly what this was. Kind of reminded me a lot of Spike Jonze and his style of movie making. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of quirky, and the message was obvious, but, it wasn't kind of too in your face. And, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but my overall impression of it is that everyone should see it and understand where the message is coming from. And I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely see it again.
Justin, how about you?
Yeah, Chris, you brought up like Spike Jonze and like the surreal sort of like yes, you did, like the Michel Gondry and all that kind of stuff with like those guys come from commercials, right? And what I find interesting is that I was trying to think because just for context, Boots Riley, the director of this movie, he is the lead singer and writer of The Coup, which is a very sort of left wing.
They're like a rap group. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they're like a rap group, right? So a lot of his songs are political, and they sort of relate and inform what you see in the movie as well. Right,
and I was going to say, I feel like because Spike Jonze comes from the medium of commercial, which you have to get your message across very fast and direct.
Yes.
Same thing with rap and with music. Those mediums happen in 30 seconds and in 3 minutes respectively. So with that, I found like there was kind of a little bit of a similarity between what Boots Riley did on this movie and what Spike Jonze has done in his movie, and kind of being creative and having that space to tell the story how you want to, but also to not really dilly-dally around the plot line and kind of move the plot along pretty quickly and expediently, but allow the viewer to be engaged in the movie and in the plot.
Yeah, because it does move, right? And I was sort of trying to wrestle. I was like, okay, he's a musician. What kind of similarities can I see between music and musicality, lyricism, and what he put on the screen? And really, the more I thought about it, it didn't really come from a musical place, but it came from things that are sort of tangential to that, right? Because, like, for example, like say a music video, or like short film, like you said, you have to convey very broad things in a flash, right? Something in very unique timescales compared to a movie. A movie's 2 hours long, but for a music video, you got like 3 minutes, right? So they tend to lend itself to experimentation, and maybe that's where the musicality comes in. It's not overtly on the screen, but maybe it was in the process of creation. So I don't have much visibility into that, obviously, but I think that it did inform the message in a sort of important way that kept you engaged, kept the movie moving. And just fun.
Exactly.
Like I didn't expect it, because you think, political movie, you think messagey, you think, that kind of like, okay, they're really laying on the message. It's not that kind of movie. It's remarkably gentle and fun and funny. Like it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Like I've come out and said that I don't really like comedies to begin with, but this is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Like, it's hilarious.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of that is because we as the viewer can relate to, the main character, right? I mean, all four of us here are millennials. We've all had trouble finding jobs and kind of having to fight that internal fight between, what do I need to do economically versus what do I want to do to satisfy myself, intrinsically. And I think, that's kind of how I really related to the main character. I understand this is not the spoiler portion of, the review here, but I think it's safe to say, we kind of, he has trouble finding that job at first, and the first scene of the movie is when he gets like that telemarketing job, and sales. Personally being in sales, I know that it can be a little bit of a struggle to do what you need to do to make money versus do what you need to do to make yourself go to bed at night. So I think we can relate to the main character really well in this movie, and that's kind of what helps us kind of go along for the ride. And it is, yes, it does have a message, but it's not cloying at all, and we can actually relate to what's going on in the movie. And I think that's a really cool part of Boots Riley's storytelling.
I want to jump on that as someone who has yet to see it, but I can already get a lot from what you guys have said about it and from the trailers. But yeah, that the relatability element that comes in from the telemarketing position, and just to see some of the visuals play out, and just the inevitable things seem to be going off the rails for me. I call it going from the mundane to the insane. And Justin, you said it was a fun movie, and I'm delighted to hear that because it's going to reel you in with something grounded, but it's eventually just going to go to an entirely different realm in terms of pacing, progression, and I guess just the believability of the scenario. How well do you think those elements flow?
Yeah, to the pacing, like I said, it just kept moving, right? Like that was the important part because he's trying to say a lot, right? Like Chris was saying, the sort of struggle between the individual and the collective, and how the interests of the individual really clash with the collective, right? So I think to fit that whole discussion in the movie, the sort of prevailing metaphor of that, you kind of have to keep it moving, and you have to keep it light, right? If you get too bogged down in that, it can just get trying and sort of dull and maybe sometimes overly cynical. But this movie has like zero cynicism, despite the fact that it's a giant middle finger.
That's surprising. You know what I mean? Delightful to hear.
Yeah. And in terms of the believability, like Chris was saying, it dabbles in that whole. It's the magical realism thing, right? Where it's not creating a magical realm except rendering it realistically. It's quite the opposite. It's grounding the establishing reality, and then twisting it in just little ways, at first at least, and seeing what changes, kind of finding those variables and sort of making it a great experiment, and so I think the believability works only because of the exponential arc of that believability sort of degrading, so yeah, it's an interesting movie just in the progression of it.
My take is much more simple. It's a science fiction movie, and don't believe like 100% of anything that happens in the movie. Like actually, but and we'll kind of discuss this when we get into the spoiler section. But the kind of theme of the movie could very well happen. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But there are things that when you kind of think about it, you're like, wow, that's like it's like a little bit of a stretch what the director's telling me could happen, but it's not too far away. But there's other things that you're like, just come on, there's no, get this out of here.
I agree 100% with everything Justin and Chris have been saying, and I guess my just other thing is I really need to see it again. A lot of visual gags just kind of just happened, and you just pass by them, kind of like Arrested Development, where you just don't really they don't really say anything, or they spend very little time on it, just move on, and it's like, oh, like. There was a particular scene in the beginning where something was written on a billboard and they just like moved past it, and like I think Justin, you and I, like we laughed like 2 whole seconds later. We're like, oh my god, we're laughing at the other thing and missed the dialogue on the next scene.
Or there's like various T-shirts and jewelry that say things that are sort of, sometimes they're overt and call attention upon themselves, sometimes they're not, and I think you need a little both, obviously. But man,
this movie really lends itself to like subsequent viewings. I want to see it like a second and maybe even a third time in theaters.
It's amazing that it wants you to feel that way about the movie. That's incredible, actually.
That's our recommendation. Absolutely, thumbs up from all of us. And so we're gonna move into the spoiler discussion now to break it down. And so Bradley, thank you for joining us per usual. We'll see you next time. You can find Brad at BradleyMcGinn2 on Twitter. So give him a shout out. Stay dandy, Brad.
Brad, good to talk with you as always, man. Maybe I'll catch you next time I'm up there. All right, dude.
Bye.
All right, peace out, guys.
Okay, here we are. Spoiler alert for Sorry to Bother You.
I'll kind of start with this, and Justin, tell me, and John, tell me if you guys kind of agree with it. But this was like a movie of 2 halves, right? Like the first part of the movie, where Cassius is, getting the telemarketer job, working up the ladder through the ranks. That's all fine and dandy. And that was really enjoyable to watch, kind of lighthearted. We kind of identified with Cassius, as a protagonist, and, we know what his whole thing's all about. But then we got into the second part where, we see these, demonic horseman creatures with the yard foot cocks, whatever, and it kind of like that was kind of put it over the top a little bit, and I just kind of felt like it was a movie of strictly 2 halves, and the first half was really funny and easy to watch, and the second one kind of labored through a little bit. I don't know what you guys thought.
Yeah, I thought rather than halves, maybe like an exponential growth, because it
Two completely different concepts. But.
Yeah, it's sort of a slow burn, and then whoa. You know what I mean? And I think that's intentional because of that magical realism. What he's trying to do is establish our world and sort of make us relate, right? And then in order for the ending to have that punch or that sort of, I don't want to say message, but like to make us consider the difference between our reality and their reality. Obviously, all of a sudden you turn it up to 20, right? Turn the knob up to 20 and say, whoa, what was this sort of grounded thing that could have existed in our world? Like, it makes you consider that's absurd, but also how absurd is that?
Like, what next thing is going to come out of left field that I didn't see coming, but in hindsight is completely
consistent with what they set up?
Exactly. What it's not like when I look back on it I'm not going to be surprised about. So I kind of get that. Like, this whole thing about, creating slave labor out of people who are now genetically engineered to be half horse, half man, equisapiens, as they call them.
Jesus Christ.
I fucking loved it.
And actually, I think we hit on something important is that it's not like it. I don't think anyone would describe this as a twist, right? Like a twist ending, Like I don't think I haven't read or heard anyone say, "Oh, it's like a twist ending." It's surprising, but it's completely consistent with what was set up before, and I think that's actually very hard to do. A lot of movies that try to do the twist ending, it's like, well, that either negated what I thought was important, so it didn't matter, or just changed everything in such a violent degree that it wasn't consistent with the rest of the movie. But I think this did a really good job of connecting. Like, it must have been hard to direct this and sort of make it logical to the audience. So there must have been a lot of back work and to make it just make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, going off your thing, Justin, I think it really benefited from being undermarketed, at least from my perspective. I didn't hear a lot about it except for the trailer that you sent me, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. It's like I didn't know much going into it, so I think that's kind of, it feeds into the thing that you're talking about, where like, you didn't quite expect it for sure, but it's not necessarily the Shyamalan twist moment, right?
Yeah, and they did put a healthy amount of marketing into it, but not overtly so. But I think they managed expectations well with that trailer, right? The trailer really enticed you with it was sort of like an elevator pitch, right? And not only was it an elevator pitch of, okay, the guy's story, right? What's happening here? What's it gonna be about? But really, it drew you in with the visuals, with the fun, like the little cards that said like, oh, directed by Boots Riley, Lakeith Stanfield, like Tessa Thompson. Those kind of things in the trailer were also very visually interesting, but also contrasted very starkly against his telemarketing job. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like that push-pull contrast between the heightened stylism of his directing compared to the subject matter of, oh, they're making like a telemarketing union. That's what this movie's about. I thought that was really interesting and a lot of fun.
Well, it's kind of like I said. I see a lot of comparisons with Boots Riley and this style of movie versus Spike Jonze, and you can have a beautiful stylistic movie about a family on a fucking train, and Spike Jonze will make that movie all day, So it's all about the director and how he wants the movie to look, at least aesthetically. But it kind of helps. With if you kind of strip away everything about this movie, it's kind of boring. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to make sure I articulate what I'm thinking here, but it's a kind of a bland tale about a guy who's kind of faced to make a choice, and does he go for money or does he kind of reconcile his morals and ideals at the end of the day. Yeah. Right. Every movie's like that. But I felt Boots Riley's storytelling and the way he made the movie and the way, we saw the movie and those stylistic choices he made really kind of helped us. They drew us in to the message, and it kind of prevented it from being just like another bat him over the head with the same kind of thing over and over again.
I completely agree. And I think that it's purposely so. I think it's purposely super mundane because it could have been like, oh, he'll have a job. What's a cool job? Maybe he's like a ski and like that kind of thing.
Right.
But it's literally the most like when you go up to someone and say, hey, what's the most mind-numbing job. Oh, you telemarketing, right? So I think it's purposely so, and I think Boots Riley recognizes that and purposely plays up that contrast for both comedic effect, but also to make it more relatable, but also to make it more dramatic. I don't know. It's this interesting push-pull.
100%.
What about how about some of the like the deliveries and the acting and some of the characters? What did you think of the main? What was the lead's guy?
Lakeith Stanfield.
Yeah, I didn't personally know him, to be honest, going into this, but I knew obviously Tessa Thompson and Armie Hammer and stuff. But what did you think of the delivery?
Lakeith Stanfield was he's from Detroit, the TV series, but also
Atlanta.
Atlanta, sorry. I was thinking of the video game. I was thinking of the video game Detroit, but also her character Detroit, Atlanta, and Get Out.
So he's just kind of making his renaissance, but he's been in a lot of, especially these. It's funny if you think about Sorry to Bother You, Get Out, Atlanta. What do they all have in common? Well, they're about kind of how race is approached in America, or rather how it should be approached, and how the Black American struggles through today's time, which is it's a huge focal point of culture and art these days. So the fact that Lakeith Stanfield has been in 3 movies or TV series about not just any movie or TV series, but really monumental and critically acclaimed and a popular series of movies about that. I think he's kind of really making a great foundation for his career, but I'm really excited to see where he goes. But he's got the chops if this movie is any indication.
And not only that, but like what he brings to the acting itself, because you can see it in Get Out, even though he played more of a minor role in that, right? The contrast between his character in the beginning, when he's walking down the street, he's scared, the car's chasing him, and he's nervous and he's sort of timid. He's like, what's going on here, right? And then the contrast between that, hours later, probably not hours, but like a long time later in the movie, we see him and he's that subjugated guy who's in the social circle. He's at the party. He's like, oh, hey guys, I'm wearing a hat. I'm wearing a suit, blah, blah, blah. That contrast is very interesting to see the effect of the social environment on his character there. And I feel like this is that writ large in this movie now, where he's like, throughout the movie, he's this very timid guy. He's shoulders down, neck down. He's kind of like, okay, I'm kind of doing my thing, whatever, right? I got my girlfriend, but I'm living in a garage, and it's sort of like, I don't know, this reservedness contrasted against, as he's getting cockier, as he's rising up the ranks, he's kind of, he's playing up that white voice as well. That social environment changes his character as well. And I think it's kind of hard to pull that off to make it believable that this guy and the other guy are the same people. You know what I mean?
How do we feel about Armie Hammer's characters having 2 chances to make it big in like the tech world? First as, the Winklevoss twins in Social Network, and now as, what the hell's this guy's name? Steve Lift, right?
Yeah, Steve
Lift. And he's played 2 douche tech bros in 2 movies. He's a great actor. He's fun to watch. I think he's underrated as a comedic actor, to be honest with you.
Dude, that's what I thought from Man from U.N.C.L.E. Like, he was like this German dude and had this thick accent, but like he was actually pretty subversive and funny in that role too.
He's handsome as shit, though.
He's really good looking. Like him and Mike Fassbender.
Yeah. Did you guys see Free Fire? He was in Free Fire too. That was a lot of fun.
No, I never saw that. Get out of here.
And how do we feel about Tessa Thompson, the kind of like the foil to him, but also not the antagonist necessarily? It's kind of an interesting role she played there. Part of the resistance.
I cracked up at that performance art scene. I thought that was the funniest thing.
Brilliant scene.
So great. She's phenomenal. I just think whenever you get this kind of like core of great young undiscovered talent, that we've had in this movie, it's just like this is like the perfect cocktail for when you have a great aspiring director like Boots, You've got this, movie with a message. You've got interesting storytelling. You've got this great acting core. Like this movie, I think is going to make a really significant impression, especially how I was kind of talking about it being a series of, 2 or 3 other movies and TV shows with regards to, with race as a main subject and theme. And I think this is really going to make some waves in our society, and I hope it does.
Yeah, dude, Tessa Thompson's shirt in that one scene, the feature is female ejaculation. That was like the funniest thing ever, man.
I died.
Yeah, but yeah, it's interesting. She does sort of play a foil, and she sort of calls out, like their relationship is still pretty solid. Not, the romantic relationship is sort of done midway through the movie, but she sort of calls Cassius out, on his BS, and doesn't push him away, but also says, "Yo, you're not part of the team right now. You can come back whenever you want, but." He's sort of losing his moral center.
If it weren't for her, Cassius wouldn't be facing the dilemma he did face. Whether I want to continue on the track I'm doing and make a shit pot of money and be very successful, or do I want to be able to sleep at night and kind of face my morals and reconcile with those, and make sure those who are less fortunate than I kind of get their up and coming. So if it weren't for Tessa Thompson and her character, we wouldn't have this movie. She's about as integral as anyone else.
Yeah, and she's the one that lives by the courage of her convictions, right? And her art reflects that. And it was important that Cassius, when he was at her art opening, didn't understand her art, right? He comes up and interrupts it, and she's like, "What are you doing? Like, you of all people should know what this is about,
Right.
So yeah, she's sort of the heart of the movie.
Yeah, there were a couple scenes for me that was like, I'm trying to remember specifically, but like, at any point did you feel like, it kind of went from funny to be like, oh man, like this is actually pretty sad. Just realizing like this is how it is. There were some moments where I felt uncomfortable laughing. I was like, oh my god, like this is. I think like maybe for me, when he was at the party with all the power callers and it was like, yeah, entertain us or whatever,
Yeah, rap.
Yeah, it was really funny, but then like it kind of ebbed and flowed between, oh man, like I was like, it got me really thinking, and I was like, oh gosh, like, what the scene means, like it's not. I bordered on uncomfortable for some parts of the movie. I don't know how you guys felt, but.
Well, there was that scene when he was rapping when he said the N-word like 100 times.
Yeah.
So that made me super uncomfortable. But that's part of the political message, right? And it's something that we kind of have to face. Have to be uncomfortable if we're going to hear, this side of the story. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, we shouldn't like, as an audience, I don't think, feel guilty about laughing or anything, because that's obviously what Boots is trying to. There is a certain relief reaction biologically that happens when you're laughing, but he takes advantage of that in a very aware way, which I think speaks to how finely crafted those scenes are. But I mean, that scene specifically sort of talks about subsuming culture and sort of like how I mean, modern sensibilities of rap have sort of been subsumed by popular culture, and I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't have the full context of what that means because obviously I don't have that background, but you can tell that what he's trying to get at. You know what I mean? And I think we've all been at parties where you kind of feel that sort of pressure, not only in a race way, but sort of just like pressure to be performative and to sort of fit in, and that speaks to just the biological need to fit in. You know what I mean?
It speaks to us as millennials more than anything because we're the generation that we've emerged from college with the most student loan debt. We've racked up the most credit card debt. We're sorry, I just coughed. We've we're the kind of facing the biggest financial challenges, but we're the youngest generation to do so. And when we're faced with the choice of, would you rather be financially secure, and have, everything material that you've ever wanted and have money never be a worry of yours ever again? Or, are you willing to sacrifice that for the good of your morals and ethos? And that's, kind of a situation that really, I think, resonates with, people of our age and even younger who are actually forced maybe not to make that decision, in such dramatic fashion, but, who do feel like, well, do I want a job that pays well, or do I want a job that I feel good about at the end of the day? So that's kind of why I felt like this movie really resonated with me.
Yeah. And also, like, that's also why I think it's a sort of gentle movie, because there's a lot of, I don't know, media, music, movies out there that take a more, and especially if you look at Twitter, but take a more direct approach, and it's a more of a fuck you, not going to take this, that kind of thing, right? Just raging. And, I understand that, and that's fine and all that, but I feel like this movie is sort of a gentle fuck you, because it does have that punk sensibility, and it does have a lot of, they literally say fuck you a bunch of times in the movie, but like it's also gentle because he makes Cassius so relatable and sort of representing the other side in our protagonist, who we ostensibly like care for, right? He is sort of the surrogate, and we are sort of in his emotions, right? And he's portrayed largely as a sympathetic guy, and it doesn't ignore that the root of his problems is trying to pay off things that are sort of, we think of as morally righteous, like paying back his uncle, he's going to get foreclosed. Like those are things that like are important to people, right? But it's sort of saying that the interests of the individual and the interests of the collective are kind of at odds sometimes, and it's kind of hard to reconcile that, because while his intentions are righteous, the effect of his actions might not be aligned with that, So I think it is gentle, and it's sort of like it's not FU, it's like, hey, just recognize what you're doing, recognize the effect of your actions, maybe come on our side a little bit, and regardless of what you think, economically, politically, etc., I think it's nice that he's so considerate as a storyteller to kind of be willing to extend that hand to someone who might not think his way, you know what I mean? Who might not agree with him politically or economically. It's sort of a very gentle, hey, like, can you consider what I'm, saying right here? So
that's the beauty of movie as a storytelling vehicle, is you can, put the message in terms that someone might understand by using a character that everyone can relate to. So, agreed. How great! Like, let me ask you guys this question: would you snort horse cocaine to have a 2-foot cock, but you had to look like an equisapien the rest of your life? Do you think that's a good trade-off?
For 5 years?
For 5 years.
Be the MLK of the equisapiens.
Right. Well, listen, Cassius was the only one who was in there for 5 years.
Yeah, that's true.
He was out. Everyone else had the 2-foot cock for life.
Yeah, you do become pretty strong, but I don't know.
Okay, so what did you guys think of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers style ending, where, oh my god, the thing actually happened, he turned into the Horseman?
Oh, the little stinger.
What did you guys think of that?
Bonus. I like the touch, because if it had ended where where the credits initially rolled, it was kind of like that Inception thing, right? Of like, oh, the top's still spinning. It's like, oh, he hit his nose on the garage and he had the nostril thing. Like, what's gonna happen? And it felt like a weird thing. But this one like punctuated it with a note of humor, but also some payoff there that he actually did. We'll probably go forward to become the MLK of those people, like, legitimately.
And we also got to see Army Hammer get his ass kicked, or at least implied. So that was nice.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, for me, I thought it was actually, like, I think either way it would have been fine. But I think this way was more consistent with the theme of the movie, is that it is an ongoing struggle, an ongoing discussion. And I really liked, when those horse guys saved him in the armored car, and he says, like, hey, man, same fight, same struggle, or same struggle, same fight, or something like that. I was like, oh man, like, that's really odd, because, regardless of, like, there's a lot to be made about like false allyship, or like the, like, I don't know, fights between like, the Asian American experience versus the Black American experience. It's like, we kind of need to come together and be on the same side,
Right.
And it's this ongoing discussion.
before we leave and close this out, let's just go around doing final impressions, and you can speak a bit more freely now, of Sorry to Bother You.
John, you're leading the horse here.
Oh yes, the horse. Yeah, I'm still gobsmacked and kind of reeling from the experience. I'm considering and mulling over these feelings that I'm having because I'm not, a huge social activist, and I'm kind of guilty of slacktivism and armchair, social media thoughts and prayers type bullcrap. But it really made me really reconsider that, and for a movie to make me do that rather than I think that's a powerful thing that he's created, where you can kind of penetrate people's minds through pop culture and through comedy and get these messages across. Like, for me to consider these hard feelings within myself from a movie that I was laughing 80% at, that's really powerful, and I think that's valuable in and of itself. So.
Yeah, and Bruce Riley himself is professed, communist and very left wing, right? But I don't think this movie is even about that per se. It certainly comes from that experience, but really the movie is about organization. It's about, if you want change, then you have to organize. You can't just yell, I want change, I'm very mad. That's sort of what I feel like. That's our current culture right now, is go on Twitter and just vent and say how mad I am about something. But really, Boots Riley, I think, is sort of a known critic of that sort of, like you said, I don't want to call it slacktivism, but he's a big fan of organizing, boots on the ground and affecting the change that you want to see in the world. Not as an individual, but as a collective, right? So I think that can be applied to anything, regardless of your belief. I think that is a more productive. I guess the movie's about being productive. You know what I mean?
I like that
as a group.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, kind of separating the movie from the message, I thought the movie itself was a beautiful piece of art. I kind of likened it to, like I've said earlier, Spike Jonze, and a very unique way of making a movie. And I thought it was very ahead of its time. I think we'll kind of look back on it in a couple years, couple decades as, hopefully a movie that kind of inspired or started this new wave of storytelling in movies, such as the uniqueness of how Boots kind of, told the story and shot the film, kind of that mix of surrealism, science fiction, realism itself. So that being said, the movie looked great. The message is kind of overt, but I think it's worth listening to a little bit. I think this will be a vehicle for a lot of these young actors to, hopefully make their name in the future in Hollywood and making some more great art. But overall, I kind of agree with you, Jack. I'm kind of still digesting the movie a little bit, and I think it's worthy of a second, maybe even a third watch. And, hopefully we'll kind of be able to digest it even further, understand Boots a little bit more. But man, that was a fun Saturday night. That's for sure.
Yeah, and to underscore the fun, because it was funny, man.
It was great.
That was great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, that's gonna be it for us today. That was Pop Culture Bento episode 40. So when we close out the show, Chris, we usually promote other work or our social handles. But I don't know if you want to be anonymous or if you want to promote anything.
You can. You know what? I'll give you permission to promote my Instagram.
Okay.
Which is it's just at Chris Frakes.
Gotcha.
And I feel comfortable doing that. Nothing more, nothing less.
A lot of good photography and golf stuff. That's what I've seen.
But more than that, memes.
Those dank memes. Yes, find Chris on Instagram at Chris Frakes. You can follow the show at Pop Culture Bento on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, literally everywhere. You can find our individual host pages on Twitter. I'm at JRustHarrier. Justin's at JHRussell94. And that's it for us. Remember, be excellent to each other and stay dandy. Bye, folks.